Welcome to the Deer Wizard Podcast, conversation shaping the deer industry. I'm your host, Josh Newton, the Deer Wizard. Through interviews, advocacy, and industry news, we deliver field-proven insights to help producers build better herds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Deer Wizard Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. We appreciate you. If you're listening on the podcast, that's great too. We're at all your major podcasting platforms. Apple, Spotify, you name it. So I don't really have a show prepared for you today, but I was just I was working on an article for the next NADIFA magazine, had a write-up here that I did in the Pennsylvania Deer Farmers upcoming winter event book. And so I just had some thoughts I'd share with you. Before we do that, I just want to, ask you guys, are you enjoying the show? I'd appreciate a comment down below. If there's some things that you'd like to see, shoot me a quick email, drop it in the comments section, comment on a Facebook post where we're sharing out an episode. We're always looking for topics that you all want to see covered. We have some great shows lined up here in the future. I've recorded a few just recently, and I think they're pretty good. I think they're interesting. I enjoy doing these because I get to talk to people from, all different parts of the country, folks that have different types of operations, and it allows me to expand my knowledge into places that, I may not have gone before or thought about. And so I really enjoy doing that. There's so many of you out there who are creative and innovative, and it's always great for me just being able to learn from all of you. With that said, like I was saying, if you have, topics that you want covered, I like research and stuff and learning new things. If it's something I think I have a good handle on and I can answer some questions, that'd be great. Maybe we'll do, if we get a few questions, we'll do like a listener feedback show or something like that. The other thing is that I think it would be good to, get more of you involved. So if you have a compelling story or you're working on something in your state through a regulatory or legislative process, shoot me a quick note. You can contact me through any of the socials, through my email, phone, whatever works good for you. And, let's have a chat. Let's, if there's something you need to expose or get off your chest, let's make this a platform for it. I think it's a good place for us to have those kinds of discussions, especially if it relates to a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis. So there's, as I was writing that NADIFA article, it was kind of based on, I think something that we've all been experiencing, and that's winter. And it kind of highlighted how, I've been, considering and kind of in the planning stages of building a new farm out. And, when you get to do that, you build on, your past experiences. What did you do wrong, where you currently are, or what did you do right? What works, what doesn't? A lot of times we build something out and that's, it's what we have or how we manage something, et cetera. And you have certain things that happen or events during the winter that can alter your perspective on it, and they require review, right? So I'll give you an example. So we had Mike Suttle on the podcast here, a couple episodes ago. Had a really good talk with him, and then maybe a few days, a week later, he posted on his Sinking Creek Whitetails page. If you haven't checked that out, Mike does a great job at keeping everybody updated and posting interesting content there. But he showed a doe. I'm not laughing at it. I'm laughing because it's kind of crazy, right? So he showed a doe that was out on his ranch that literally was kind of like stuck on this hillside, and there's so much ice there where he is. It looks like a skating rink, but the pitch is like this. If you're watching on the video, it's just like it's an extreme pitch of this hill, and the doe was just sliding, couldn't stand anything. And then I saw another post that he made, and this group of wild deer was like running on the road. And so they must have cut into a field somewhere, and I don't know, there was a dozen of them or something like that. And there was like this little draw that went down into a bottom. It's all kind of open pastures. And these animals, they have no chance. They cannot stand up. They're literally ice skating, they're barrel rolling. It's heartbreaking in the moment when you're looking at it. And so like it kind of highlights like, what do you do in a situation like that? And of course, in some cases the environment is so extreme that you can't do anything. But are there ways, and I'm not saying I'm going to fix the ice problem, right? But it goes to like other aspects of maybe, your individual area, right? Like, so some folks got a ton of ice. Folks got blasted with cold. Some people got a ton of snow, so on and so forth. And so winter, and when I say extreme, I'm not like, hey, there's climate change, right? Although the climate changes all the time, but these conditions highlight things that can happen and do happen, and how to build your farm or ranch around these things, right? So if you're up in the upper Midwest, call it the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, right? Let's just use the UP, right? They get a ton of snow. Or let's just say, this is even better because I saw this. Oswego County, New York, right? So kind of just northwest of Syracuse. They got like 8 or 9 feet of snow in like a week. Think about that. 8 or 9 feet of snow. What are you supposed to do with that? Well, number one, I hope your buildings are constructed to take that kind of snow load. And so you think about that and you're like, okay, well, we got a house where we got to live. Maybe we got a, utility or equipment barn. Maybe we got a deer handling facility. Maybe we have a place where we're mixing our feed, like a feed room, and maybe that's a separate building with our grain silos and such. Making sure that the construction is adequate to handle the extremes, right? So let's talk about shade fencing. So folks will build fence just like they normally do, and they'll put, shade fabric or solid paneling on there. And then they get a wind event, right? And they get 80 mile an hour, 100 mile an hour winds, and it just flattens their fence. Can we overbuild for these types of scenarios? And maybe the cost justification for that is not worth it, right? For let's call it a once in 100-year event. Maybe it is. And so as we look through all those different management and environmental constraints, those are something I've been thinking about more and more. All right. So, guys down in South Texas, talk to many of you. And, of course, I'm in North Central PA. Our average temps here in the summer are, I don't know, call it, mid 80s. Right. And you're like, it's been over 100 degrees for 90 days straight. Whew, that's some serious heat. Well, what are the things that you can do to prepare for that? Obviously, having animals that are acclimated and, maybe have some, obviously, genetics that are equipped to deal with that, it is important, right? So if you're in South Texas, you probably aren't going to have great success with breeding with Canadian bucks, right? And you're like, well, why is that? Well, generally speaking, a Canadian buck, and I'm just using Canada generally, they have to be big. They have to be robust. They got to have, 3-4 inch hairs on them and, 2-3 inches of solid fat built around them just to withstand the cold temperatures. They have to be hardy and robust. Well, obviously that animal is not going to condition the same if you put them in South Texas, right? They're not going to have the need for that, and their bodies are going to run hotter. But genetically they're built to be like that. So they're probably not going to thrive. And so the same goes for a mature, 125 pound doe, bringing her up into the UP of Michigan, right? Those deer have to be acclimatized to that particular environment. And so there is those considerations. That's on an animal side. And I'm just giving examples that are kind of coming to my head. But, what kind of things are important to you in your kind of local environment? And how do you learn those things? Well, one's through experience, right? And so you say to yourself, well, what happens if I don't have that experience? Well, you can learn from somebody else. So how does that work? What does that look like? Well, going to other farms and ranches that are located in your kind of biodiverse region of the country that have been there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, talking to those folks. You always hear the stories from the old timers. Well, back in the winter of 78, we got 45 inches of snow one time. We have an 8-foot snow drifts. And, here's the things we did to make sure that we were prepared the next time that happened. And so you work through all those things. How can we set up and construct our management style on our farm to be conducive for limiting the impacts of stress on our animals? And so I worked with some just big, broad stroke, generalized topics that covered a few of these things in that NDFA article. But, as we're in the grind of winter, we got, 15 inches of snow here, maybe a week or two ago. And I don't mind snow. I like snow personally. It wasn't too much, and the deer love it, right? Like, people are like, Josh, why do you like all the snow? Well, for us, we're flirting. Typically, we're flirting with freezing, non-freezing temperatures. Well, if we don't have snow, what does that do? Well, any pasture that has animal impact, you think about a deer hoof, right? And I'm kind of throwing up a peace sign on the video for those that are listening. It's, this is a hoof, right? And so when those hoofs hit the ground, they're like scissors. They kind of clip in underneath this matted thatch layer, and they start chunking away and killing your vegetation. And that turns to mud if it's above freezing, and then it gets below freezing at night. And that freeze thaw with no snow cover is super, super hard on pastures. Well, we got a nice snow event fairly early, and so everything's been covered. So my animals, and we herd up our animals a bit. The bucks kind of stay where they are. But like, we herd up our does a little bit. They're usually in a couple breeding pens. Again, I have a small herd. And so there's higher animal impact in those places, just generally. Makes it a little bit easier to manage. I can kind of keep the feeding range small. They're not super spread out. They like to herd up anyway, so it's not a big deal. And there's no impact on the soil at all, right? That fresh blanket of snow there is just that. It's a new, fresh environment. It'd be like in the summer, shifting your groups of animals into fresh pens, right? Get this nice, beautiful vegetation. And so the deer do really well, right? So, there's like almost no incidence of sickness. They kind of just hang out. They're in maintenance mode. Metabolisms are a little bit slower. Their feed intake's down. We've got a nice balance of, a grain pellet mixture to keep, minerals, vitamins, et cetera, going into them. And then we have, high quality hay. And so that combination provides, good nutritional conversion for them, because it's also really cold, right? And so that's kind of another thing. Like, how do you contest with super cold? Well, we were talking to Brody. Many of you watched that show that Brody and I did together. Well, he's up in northern Wisconsin, right? Like as high up as you can go, almost right on the border of the UP of Michigan. And that morning, it was in the minus 20s, minus 30s with minus 50-degree wind chills. That's cold. Like, if you've never been outside in that amount of cold and the wind's blowing, it just cuts through you. So what do we do as people? Well, we bundle up, right? We dress in layers. We make sure we got our thermals on. We got another insulating layer. We got our kind of work gear. We got our coveralls on. There's, a wind layer, a water resistant layer, and we can do okay. But like, if your skin is exposed, like you're probably going to get frostbite, right? So like, everything's pretty much covered. And those animals have to live out there all the time. So what can we do? How can we set that up? Well, we can put windbreaks in, right? We can give them, a windbreak out of the north and the west, kind of how the jet stream moves across the United States, and we can give them some good southern exposure, right? And we can construct our pens like that. How can we put in windbreaks? Well, we could put a berm in. We could have some pine or hemlock or whatever's kind of native vegetation in your area. We can manually construct, solid wall fencing. There's a whole variety of different things. We can use the topography of the land, if there is some, to provide those windbreaks, give them some of that, southern exposure for them to hang out in. Those deer will find those spots. And if you don't have those built today, the deer will kind of show you where they like to be, and you can kind of construct around that and your prevailing winds. And so, like, that's an important piece of reducing stress. If it's minus 50, that's going to cut through those animals, regardless of how big or, robust they are. And so we want to minimize stress. Like, I know it's a broad term, but like, minimizing stress is key. We want to try to maintain condition of these animals, because there's, those stressors, they have immune suppression kind of built into them. And we start, and I mentioned this in the article, we start kind of coming out of winter, and, spring starts showing up, and those animals start showing us what winter did to them, right? So we want to reduce the recovery from winter to spring. Well, why is that? Well, there's two purposes that we all know are important. One is all the bucks are going to start growing antlers. And so the process of growing antlers is, they can only intake so much food, which provides nutrition, mineral contents, et cetera. And we also, they're going to draw a lot of those minerals and such that take to grow those antlers from their bodies, right? So it's not like direct gut to antler. And so they'll use the bone structure. Where's most of the bone structure in a white-tailed deer? Well, it's kind of in the front section. You got shoulders, you got ribs, backbone, etc. And we want them to be in a state of recovery. The other is we have does. Well, what are the does doing? Well, they're lactating. They're preparing. They're growing babies in them. Most of the time they got two of them. Sometimes they got more. And so that's a constant drain on their body, right? And they have to have the structure and conditioning to feed those fawns inside of them. And as soon as those fawns come out, they got to make milk. The energy it takes to make milk is very, very similar to the energy it takes to grow big antlers, right? There's some nuances there. I'm not a technical scientist, but it's very similar as far as, energy goes, and the nutritional requirements to make those animals grow. And so we shift right into that. And we want, at least I do, maybe you guys don't, but I suspect you do. We want big fawns. We want nice quality antlers. And we have to make sure that we're minimizing the stress from, the beginning of fall through breeding into that maintenance mode of winter, and then coming out of winter into spring. And so it's not necessarily just a simple thing, but all those little factors, right? All those little things that we can review and tweak and make better animals, right? We know that. You can see it with your eyes. You have to let your eyes work and say, okay, like, what are we doing in this particular pasture that's maybe not working as good as another one? Or are there certain genetic components of some of these animals or lines that are not working? And let your eyes do the observation, and then take that info and objectively review it, right? Just make sure that you're open to all these different possibilities, and ultimately it'll pay dividends. So that was, again, it's a short article and then a DFA mag, but check it out. I hope you like it. We enjoy writing them, and I think it'll provide some value. Now, on the other side, my article that I put together for the PDFA Winter event, and I just want to take an opportunity to invite you all. February 27th and 28th at the Morgantown Event Center. Pennsylvania Deer Farmers is having their PA Winter Classic. We have a breeder auction. We got some great lots. We have a donation and fundraiser. We got lots of games. We have a couple really good speakers that are coming. We have Lindsay Kogut from NADAR. She's coming to talk about the GBV technology, some GMS, and also the breeding coefficients and the heterozygous scores that they released with Dr. Seabury. So that'll be interesting to, we have some new tech that we can kind of integrate into our breeding programs to make our animals better, at least on the CWD front, which is awesome. I love getting new tools. Just got to figure out how to use them, right, as we all kind of work through this. And we also have Jason Snavely. So Jason, I had met him, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, and he's a wildlife biologist by trade. He has a consulting business, but he specializes in all sorts of stuff, but soil health and seed. And so he's done a lot of really great work over the years on looking at soil health and, what kind of plants and plant structures can benefit our white-tailed deer. So he's coming to talk on Saturday. Lindsay's going to be talking on Friday. We have the Department of Ag there. We'll have some updates from PDFA as well, but it's looking to be a good event. Anyway, so in the article, I had a fellow board member just ask me to kind of talk about some of the things that PDFA does. Now, obviously, this is a volunteer group. Like many state organizations, we have a paid office person to help keep us organized and do some of the clerical work and bookkeeping and stuff. But we're all volunteers, right? And so, many of us have day jobs or run businesses, and of course, take care of our families and our farms. And the volunteer work can kind of kind of stray off to the wayside. But we've been really fortunate in Pennsylvania to have a good group of guys, working over a long period of time, over 20 years now. And they dedicate their time in the best way that they can to provide, events like this. And a lot of folks are like, well, why are we always focused on events? Why can't we look at, our regulations and, legislative stuff? And it's, we are, right? Like we're always engaged on that front. And if you've dealt with government for any extended period of time, it's an incredibly slow process. And from a producer standpoint, at least in the deer industry, it can be very frustrating. But we always have our nose to the grindstone there. We have a lobbyist that helps, keep an eye out for anything bad that comes along or needs our attention, or the good things too. They just seem to be less and less and more of the bad. But, these guys put these events on. And when I say these guys, I mean our board. And it's a great way for, like deer farmers to meet up, have some food, hang out, raise some money. And folks are like, well, where does this money go? And of course, if you're a member of PDFA, you can request the financials on what we spend our money on. The main priority is just kind of, keeping the organization together, having an office staff to do that, and then, covering the cost of our lobbyist to, keep us out of hot water, so to speak. And so one issue that came up here, I guess maybe a month ago now, is our feed tax issue in the state. And so the Department of Revenue in the state of Pennsylvania, kind of plucked our, if you buy deer feed, you got to pay tax on it. And so we're working on getting that clarified. And it looks like if you have a CLO or Cervid livestock operator's license, you are tax exempt. So if you're from PA and you're listening to this, you get your tax exemption. And so we're trying to codify that into law. And of course, the legislative process is slow, but we made a little bit of headway on the regulatory side. So that's something we've been working on. Again, volunteer group, takes time to work through these things, but that's why we have our lobbyists there to help us work through these things. They know the process that we have to go through. They know who to contact. They help us set those meetings up if we need them, get clarification, get legislation put forward, have the debates if we need to go in front of the committees and testify about the impacts or the benefits, et cetera, of certain things. We can do that, right? And it's because of that. So that's honestly where a lot of the money goes. The other thing is we do some events, right? So just in the past month, PDFA was at the Pennsylvania Farm Show. If you've ever been to a state farm show like the one in Pennsylvania, there's literally like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that go through that farm show, and they have every ag thing you can think of there. But we have a booth, right in the main hall, and we set up there each year. We have some antlers there. We have some information about deer farming as an ag based sector in Pennsylvania, what we do to rural economies, how we preserve habitat, the economic impact, and we get to talk to people that entire time. It's a 7-day event, so we have people there every day from the board who volunteer their time to drive over into Harrisburg, multiple hours away from their homes and their families, taking off work, et cetera. And they do that on behalf of the members in PA. This happens in a lot of states, right? And so just that face-to-face interaction with the public, also, the legislators and regulators that are kind of walking around, visiting with people, we get to say, hey, we're a viable business industry in Pennsylvania, and we help contribute to these local and in many cases rural economies, and it's important, right? So, they're representing you. That's what just a membership dues gets you. And so, that's one example. We have another event called Ag Progress Days. We usually do some sort of support or attendance there. And so like these things cost money, right? I know our vice president and myself, Jared Berry, we attended the cornucopia event. And so, that costs money. We usually go. Pretty cool event. You guys will like this. So in the Harrisburg Capitol, there's a big rotunda, right? So there's like elevators or escalators that come down out of the House chamber, and they have this big rotunda area, and we set up there. So there's like a lot of the state farming organizations there. So like the pork producers and the mushroom guys and the honeybee keepers and all that, and the deer farmers are there. And so we set up a table, we take some antlers, and we get some venison sticks, and we cut those up and prepare them. And then all the legislators come out of session, and they come down and they talk with us, right? So you got staff, you got ag, you got legislators. Just so happens the governor's addresses that day. And so everybody's there. And so we get this FaceTime for a couple hours, just in a real casual setting. And people come up, they grab a snack stick. Usually what happens, they pop it in their mouth. They're like, that's really good. And you say, hey, this is Pennsylvania venison, right? So deer farmers are providing, this high quality food to residents of PA and across the state. Make sure you support us when, we need you to. And so that's a great interaction. That takes time and money, right? And to be clear, like Jared and I don't get paid for that. Like we don't take money for that, but it does cost money to attend. Obviously we donate our times for that, and we enjoy doing it, right? Like we enjoy representing Pennsylvania deer farmers. This happens all around the country. There are so many events just like this. And so when you start looking at those things cumulatively, it's important to support your state associations any way you can. And maybe if your state's not doing those things, get involved, right? Donate your time, get on the board. Say, hey, we should do X, Y, Z, right? And we think it's important because, we want to help support the other farmers that maybe can't go. And so we do that. Same can be said nationally. And so if you have, and this kind of will steer us right into the association conversation, which will be super brief. If there are things that you think are necessary for state associations or national associations to do, you should bring that to the members of those people. And, I found it best it can be hard, right? To be kind of non-combative and to criticize these associations. But, if there's something that you think would be beneficial, that you see that maybe they don't, make those suggestions, right? Send an email over to, someone that's on the board or their executive director, if they have one, of the office or whatever that looks like. And, get involved. If you don't like it, get involved. Right. And that's I think that's just, good, solid advice. So anyway, that's all I got for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Again, we'd really appreciate it if you, hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube, or lock in that follow button on a podcast. If you think a show is worth sharing out on your socials, or through an email blast to a association or something like that, we'd really appreciate it. If you want to come on, have a chat about something that's going on in your state, or, on a personal level on your farm, or you have an interesting story, get a hold of me. We really enjoy doing this, and we want the Deer Wizard podcast to be a platform to grow our industry and make sure that it's here long-term for, our kids when we're gone. So, ladies and gentlemen, as always, stay tuned for another episode of the Deer Wizard podcast.